Hello, Tech fans, and welcome into episode 178 of the Tech Sideline Podcast, originating from TSL's high-tech studios in the Virginia Tech Corporate Research Center. What a great show we have planned for you today. We'll start off the podcast by previewing the 2021 NFL Draft that gets underway later this week, where Christian Darrisaw and Caleb Farley might go in the first round. Plus, what about Khalil Herbert and Diablo? We get into some mock drafts and where we could see Hokies fall in this week's NFL Draft. Plus, coming up a little bit later, important questions about the upcoming season for Virginia Tech football. We've been doing position previews the last couple of weeks. Now we do overview, big picture questions going into the 2021 season, and reactions about the Reach for Excellence campaign from Will and Chris a week removed. It's all coming up, episode 178 of the Tech Sideline Podcast that gets started right now. Whether you are watching live or archived on YouTube, listening on Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud, Amazon Music, Spotify, Google Podcasts, or on Stitcher, so glad that you could join us as we record on Monday morning, April 26th. Our crew, as always, to my left, we're wearing the same Tech Sideline polo. Today, our managing editor here at TSL, Chris Coleman. Across the way, he's looking spiffy today. He is Will Stewart, our founder and general manager. Behind the scenes, the best podcast producer in the land. He is Malcolm Stewart, and I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. Again, great to have you with us as we record on Monday morning, April 26th. If you're watching live on YouTube right now, we want you to drop a question in that we'll get to at the end of the show. But I mean, whether live or archived, well, what are just two simple things you could do right now? Or three things, actually.
Like and subscribe. And definitely submit a question, but the YouTube algorithm really likes once the archive video is posted for you to comment. So appreciate everybody who's been commenting, and I think that's been helping. We got pretty good traction on the last podcast. Could have been the subject matter, though. You know, we went over 2,000 YouTube views for the first time in a while in the last podcast. So very cool.
The last time we went over 2,000 views on a podcast was the Monday after the North Carolina State Virginia Tech thrilling dual meet that won the dual meet championship.
Yeah, so you did your research. Cool.
I did. I was just talking to Chris about that. So that was a great show. Speaking of thrilling moments, such as Virginia Tech beating North Carolina State in wrestling.
Where is this going?
You could help Virginia Tech wrestling today by going to southeastrtc.com to get involved with Virginia Tech wrestling, a program that finished number 2 and number 3 in 2 different polls in the country at the end of the regular season. Again, that's southeastrtc.com to get involved with Virginia Tech wrestling, one of the best wrestling programs in the entire country.
So let's expand upon that. Did you see the news from yesterday for Virginia Tech wrestling? Unfortunately, I'm looking it up on my phone.
They got a big commitment.
They got a big time commitment. They got a 2022 wrestler who is tops in his weight class and top 10 in the country.
You know, when you dedicate a lot of resources to a program, they tend to recruit better.
Yes. Now it's we can drill into the Reach for Excellence stuff later, but you know, Tony Roby and Jared Freyer and that staff do such a good job recruiting. Southeast Regional Training Center is a big part of that. And if they ever, one of the weapons that is not in the holster for them is all in-state scholarship costs. If they ever get that tool in their toolbox, it's going to get even better. And we'll talk about that some later. So before we get into it, I want to give a shout out to my guy, Jeb Burton. Got his first Xfinity win over the weekend. I was mad because it was on a different channel and my television didn't DVR it, you know, I was out shopping and stuff. So anyway, congratulations to Jeb. I put a lot of time in watching Jeb, wanting him to win, and then I'm AWOL the day he finally does.
At Talladega, right?
At Talladega, buddy.
Right.
Shake and bake.
Yeah. So you know, I was a big Elliott Sadler fan back in the day, all because he drove the Virginia Tech car in Richmond that year. he had a couple of famous wrecks at Talladega. You should go YouTube them when we finish the podcast.
Who was it that went airborne in the Cup Series yesterday? Joey Logano. It's interesting because Logano was doing color analysis on the Xfinity race, and then the next day he goes airborne in the Cup race. So just a great day for Jeb. I did get to see the replay at late Saturday night. He raced really well. The car was good. The pit crew was good. Just one of those days for him. So shout out to him because he does listen to the podcast and he will eventually be a guest.
Yes, really looking forward to having him on. A big congratulations to Jeb, and he's a pro Hokie. And there are going to be a couple more pro Hokies by the end of this week with the 2021 NFL Draft. That's what we're going to lead off the podcast with. But again, a little bit later, we'll get into the biggest question marks Will and Chris have going into the 2021 season for Virginia Tech football. We'll get into big picture questions such as if the Hokies are going to be a contender for the ACC title, this player not named Braxton Burmeister has to be a big part of the success of the team. Those kind of questions are coming up a little bit later, as well as the Reach for Excellence campaign. But it is that week, the NFL Draft. It is reality television for 4 hours on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. What player is going to slide? What player goes early? 2 potential Hokies. Well, actually, not even potential. 2 Hokies are going in the first round. One would be a surprise if he doesn't go in the first round. That's Caleb Farley. The question is, will he slide because of his medical status? But Christian Darrisaw is going to be a first-round pick. But before we get into the 2021 NFL Draft and where these Hokies could go, I'm curious, do you have a favorite NFL Draft that surrounds around a Virginia Tech player or players being picked?
It would have to be the one where the Edmonds brothers were both taken in the first round.
Mm-hmm. That was 2018.
Yeah. And I think in 2005 they had something like 8 guys selected, and that was pretty cool.
2005 they had a bunch of guys selected. There were a few years there. I want to say 2002 draft, that 2001 team that had so many good defensive players on it. Plus like Andre Davis on offense. That was a big draft for Tech too. So generally, like the one Will mentioned, where that both Edmonds brothers went in the first round, and those drafts where you knew like a large amount of players were going to be drafted. I guess it would have been 2006 draft. Will 2005
I'm
season.
Feverishly looking it up on Wikipedia.
Yeah, so that should have been guys like Jeff King would have been in that draft. Ton of guys on defense, like
man, this is a lot of scrolling.
Jimmy Williams, Justin Hamilton would have been in the 2006 draft.
2006, It is a long list. Jimmy Williams, Darryl Tapp were second-round selections. James Anderson was a third-round selection. Jeff King, fifth-round selection. Jonathan Lewis, sixth round. And then the seventh round, Justin Hamilton, Jimmy
Humes.
Martin.
Humes is in there, isn't he?
Will Montgomery and Cedric Humes.
Yeah.
Cedric Humes was the last guy picked amongst the Hokies. From pick number 222 to 240, there were 4 Hokies selected.
Yeah.
So if you were still watching at that point, it was like Virginia Tech, Virginia Tech, Virginia Tech.
Yeah, it sure was.
Yeah.
I remember way back in the day, back in the 90s, I guess this would have been the 98 draft. Some of you watching don't go back this far, but Tech had Ken Oxendine and Marcus Parker in the backfield, and they both got drafted back-to-back picks in the 7th round.
Number 201 and number 202 in the 7th round.
That's right.
So when I said 2005, I actually meant the 2006 class that Chris was talking about.
He's talking 2005 season. Yep.
Yeah.
So an underrated one, and this is simply because of just one player I can remember, and it's either 2011 or 2012, but when Tyrod got drafted, I can remember being in middle school. I thought that he was going to go 2011. I thought he might be a 4th or 5th rounder, but I remember, once, Roger Goodell will do the announcing the picks of the first round, maybe a little bit of the second, then celebrities, and then it's like the backup commissioner, like the associate commissioner, is reading off a microphone. Who is this guy?
The only thing in his job description is you will do the 4th round of the NFL.
Right. But then Tyrod got picked at, was it the 6th round by the Ravens?
Yeah, it was 6th round, 15th pick, 180 overall.
And I remember being so excited for him. And then, of course, he won a Super Bowl with the Ravens his second year as the backup to Joe Flacco. So anyways, I remember being very excited that he was
He
drafted.
plays for Houston now, right?
He does. He just signed a free agent deal.
He might find himself as a starter this year.
There is a giant sucking sound at the starting position there due to some off-field incidents.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see what they do in the draft from that standpoint.
Nobody has had a more unfortunate NFL career than Tyrod Taylor. And what's happened to him, right? Like, he leads Buffalo to their first playoff appearance in decades. They move off of him. Then he goes to Cleveland. He's the starter. He gets hurt. Baker Mayfield comes in. And then he goes to Los Angeles. He's the starter. His doctor punctures his lung. His own team doctor.
Yeah.
And then Justin Herbert takes over. So,
right.
anyways.
So if I had a piece a piece of advice for Tyrod Taylor, and again, I'm not a big NFL guy, but I do remember watching some of that season where it was him and Baker Mayfield playing for Cleveland. And to me, the real difference in those two guys was that Tyrod was a game manager and conservative, and when Mayfield came in, he was slinging it around.
Just slinging it around. It was like that in Buffalo, too, with Tyrod.
Yeah, And
high completion percentage, but very safe passes.
And that's probably where it really formed in him, was to be careful. It was in Buffalo, but
I think it formed at Virginia Tech.
Well, this too is true. But he's had a long career as a backup. If he gets his chance, man, just throw it all over the yard.
Just let her rip, man.
Let her rip, dude.
You've already played in the league for 10 years. You're 32
you have
years
got
old.
Nothing
you
to
got
lose
nothing
and
to lose
everything
at all.
to gain.
See, Tyrod's a great last round pick in a fantasy draft because he's going to get you rushing yards.
Yeah, that's true.
He's not going to turn. He's not going to go out there and score 25 points, but he's consistently going to be in that 15 to 20 point range.
Right.
Won't turn the ball. That's the biggest strength about Tyrod, is that he does not turn the ball over.
Yeah, so, Beamer would agree with that statement.
Yeah. So, anyways.
And so my big concern about the Dolphins is watching Tua. And he kind of played like that, real conservative last year. And then there was one game in particular I watched where the Dolphins just weren't doing anything. And then they brought in Ryan Fitzpatrick, and boom, boom, boom. All
magic happens.
Fitzmagic.
Now in Washington.
Yeah, that was the crazy game where Fitzmagic, pulled a touchdown out of his hat in the last 10 seconds.
What does he care at this point? What is he, 36 years old?
38, but he's going to be the starter for the Washington football team this year.
He's made plenty of money. He's got nothing to lose. He's got an Ivy League degree to fall back on.
Yeah, right.
So, you know where he went to school, Will?
I do not.
He went to Harvard.
Harvard, man. Yeah.
So he's got a Harvard degree. He's played in the league. He's 38 now. He's still a starting quarterback. Made a lot of money. He's called Fitzmagic. Pretty good career. I mean,
yeah.
Impeccable dresser.
Impeccable dresser.
And he's got the beard.
I did not think we'd be talking about Ryan Fitzpatrick before we talked about Christian Darrisaw today, but there you go.
To bring this back around, more than one mock draft says that Darrisaw is going to go to the Washington football team.
So let's transition. Again, 2021 NFL draft. The Hokies are going to have at least one, likely two players taken in the first round. Will's done a great job of compiling all these different news outlets and organizations and where they have Darrisaw, Farley, Diablo, and Herbert going. Because right now, those are I think it's fair to say those are the four guarantees that will be taken at some point in the draft for Virginia Tech.
Yes, I noticed that I did not put ESPN on this list, so maybe we can pull them up while we're talking. But I do have there's a couple that The Athletic does. One of them is done by Dane Brugler. Is that his last name? And Dane does his own thing, and he does all 7 rounds, I think. And then they produced one by their staff, which I think was the first and second round, kind of tossing the ball around a bunch of different people. Then there were 4 people projecting for CBS Sports, and we've got them. And then there's USA Today, WalterFootball.com, and TheDraftNetwork.com. So we can go over all that.
So Christian Darrisaw on the and I've got Dane Brugler. He calls it the Beast. Like you said, he's got every projected player drafted, like a profile. It's like 150 pages. Okay. But he's got Christian Darrisaw as the number 3 overall offensive tackle. Has him as a first-round pick, probably somewhere in the early teens to late teens. Mm-hmm. But as you said, we look at the different projections. I mean, anywhere from 13 to, 24.
24, but there's only one pick out of this entire list that has him going outside the teens.
Yeah.
Yeah. The 24th thing, one guy from CBS has him going 24th, but that's lower than anybody else.
Let me, I'm going to read real quick just a couple of sentences from Dane Brugler of The Athletic on Darrisaw, by the way. 322 pounds, right, from Upper Marlboro, Maryland. It says strengths, He's girthy, well-distributed frame, quick out of his stance to win body angles and shield defenders. A tad heavy, but stays coordinated mid-shuffle to sit in his stance and remain square to rushers. Weaknesses, gives up ground when he doesn't play strong or accurate with his hands. And then the bottom line in bold, overall, I wish Darrisaw was a more consistent finisher, but he has outstanding body control and feet for a man his size and shows the technique to be an NFL starter at either tackle or guard.
I would argue that Chaz Surratt down in North Carolina would say that Darrisaw is
Darrisaw
a pretty
can
good
finish.
Yeah.
but that is one of the few negatives against him is that that he doesn't play completely whistle to whistle.
Yeah, and here's and this is the same. It's even more pronounced, I think, from high school to college. But he's going to be a first-round pick. Everybody knows he's going to be a first-round pick. Yet there are like a list of cons here, even for first-round picks. Like this whole thing of picking prospects and everything is somewhat of a crapshoot. Too quick to open up outside hip and let defenders run the loop on him. Patient to a fault at times. No urgency when loses control of blocks. Run heavy Virginia Tech offense rarely left him on an island. Blah blah blah. So you can nitpick everybody and find faults. The stuff about him not finishing and not playing to the whistle, and basically what that means is he's not driving anybody into the ground right at the end of plays and everything.
Like Wyatt Teller
Like Wyatt Teller used to do. Yet he grades out much higher than Teller ever did at the college level. Darrisaw is just about the most technically sound offensive lineman you'll see, I think. And sometimes guys who are so focused on their technique that takes away from their aggressiveness a little bit. Right. Nobody would describe Wyatt Teller as like a technically sound player when he was at Virginia Tech. He was not as technically sound as Darrisaw. They're two different players. I think he's probably more technically sound now than he was then, and now he's probably the best guard in the NFL.
Yeah, something really started.
Both of them.
Something really started clicking for him when he got to the NFL.
I think Darrisaw. I think he'll be a long-time player in the NFL. I think he'll always be a technically sound player. And as those techniques, they become second nature to him, that's going to open up his aggressiveness to a certain extent. Like, he's not going to have to think about technique so much. And he's just going to focus on being aggressive because he's going to go out there and know what to do every snap without even thinking about it. So I think that's something I would not necessarily overlook, but I just think that's something that's going to be overcome with time. Yeah,
it reminds me of, I get Car and Driver magazine. I've been getting it since 1988 when I first got out of Tech, and when they review cars, they of course do the long written review, and then in a little box they'll have 3 positives for a car and 3 negatives. They can review one of the best cars in the world, but they have to list 3 negatives.
Right.
So it's kind of like that. You're not going to get in one of their top 10 cars that their top 10 list they do every year and focus on those 3 negatives. It's just something they do in their articles, and that's what you're experiencing here.
Yeah.
So you look at where he could go. Again, it looks like, I think it's fair to say, anywhere from 10 to 20 is fair.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the Draft Network, it's interesting. Most of this stuff, guys, is actual mock drafts, but a couple of these things are kind of ranking players as prospects without really considering the dynamics of the draft and team needs and things like that. And Walter, the Draft Network, not Walter Football, but the draftnetwork.com lists Farley as the number 7 prospect and Darrisaw as number 12.
A whole Caleb Farley with no injury history is absolutely a top 10 prospect. I mean, there just aren't very many guys who run like that and who are as big as him at the cornerback position. Caleb Farley is like Jimmy Williams, except faster. Not as physical against the run, but from a pure coverage standpoint, which is the most important thing for a corner, he's like Jimmy Williams, except much faster.
One of the things that I think PFF says about Farley is, let me see if I can find the exact wording, top end speed, closed distance anytime a wide receiver got a step on him downfield. And something else I read didn't say anytime, it said every single time he loses ground, he makes it back up.
Right, and Farley, number 7 overall prospect. I think D'Angelo Hall was the number 8 pick in the draft by the Falcons back in the day. Farley, from an athletic standpoint, he's a D'Angelo Hall level prospect, but he's 3 inches taller. But it's what holds him back is the back injury and the fact that he didn't play this past year. He's only got
one good year,
and not even a whole year.
Yeah.
Remember, he missed the last 2 games with that back injury.
Not to cut you off, but one thing that going back to Darrisaw real quick, a con from Pro Football Focus is that only 1 year of elite grading, massive leap from 2019 to 2020. So both, Farley and Darrisaw are first-round talents based off of one great year.
Yeah.
Well, I don't. How much is that true for most players, though? Most draft picks. Darrisaw only played 3 years of college, and like most guys, he took a massive leap forward between his second and third year.
Yeah, and most guys that do take that big leap are going to go pro. One of the more kind of just made me kind of wrinkle my face and go, really? Is a couple of these guys I read about. They're kind of old. They're 22 or 23. We talk about that with the NBA all the time. But really, the NFL thinks like that too? Yeah.
A 22-year-old rookie in the NFL, that's fine. That's ideal.
Right. Because he's big. He's a man.
Yeah.
And physicality.
He's not going to spend half his rookie year hurt because he's just not. He didn't redshirt, and he's not as physically developed. There it is.
23 minutes in.
By the way, Caleb Farley did redshirt.
Yeah, all right. Yeah. So drilling down into the Darrisaw stuff that you were talking about, in 2018, his PFF grade was a 68.6.
As a true freshman, which is very impressive for a true freshman.
In 2019, it was an 80.3.
Which is good.
And then in 2020, it was a 95.6.
80.3 is about where Wyatt Teller was for most of his college career.
Yeah. In a 95.6 for Darrisaw, you don't see many, if anybody, grade out above that.
Basically, I think he's the highest grading, just about the highest grading offensive tackle in all of college football in the PFF era since 2014.
Yeah. So what's interesting is in looking through these mock drafts, he's anywhere from the third, fourth, or even fifth best offensive tackle. Where they project him to go. So this is a guy that's going to get picked somewhere between 14 and 18, and he's actually not even the best offensive tackle. It's a pretty tackle-heavy draft.
You've actually, I was looking up. What was I looking up? I was looking up Luke Tenuta, and I wanted to see where he projected to be drafted and everything like that. And I think he's listed as the number 11 tackle prospect for his class. But that put him an early fourth-round pick. You'd think that wouldn't be very high, but there's such a premium on tackles. Yeah. They're selected way ahead of guards and centers and things like that.
Well, I was just going to say, so the offensive tackle list from Dane Brugler of Athletic, Penei Sewell, who arguably, besides Trevor Lawrence, is the best. It's Lawrence, Kyle Pitts, this tight end from Florida, is probably the highest.
We know all about Kyle Pitts. He came down to Virginia Tech in Florida.
Yeah. I was reading the bio this morning. I was like, it came down to 2 schools for Pitts, and went the other way. I hate to say it turned out to be a pretty good decision. Can you
imagine? Tech would have had him, Dalton Keene, and James Mitchell on the same team.
All at the same time.
Rashawn Slater of Northwestern is the second tackle, and he could go anywhere from 7 to 10. And then it's Darrisaw. However, I wouldn't be surprised, like you said, of the Pro Football Focus grades. I wouldn't be surprised to see Darrisaw jump Slater. Sewell is the surefire.
Slater's Northwestern.
Interesting
to go back and look at his recruiting ranking.
Oh yeah,
because
I'll tell you right now. Give me 1 second.
Okay. Well, just do his name and then 247, and that'll take you.
He was a 3-star offensive guard coming out of high school. He's the number 32 guard nationally, number 91 recruit in Texas. Overlooked by most Big 12 and Texas programs. Rice was the only Texas school to offer him a scholarship.
So, now who was the first tackle?
Penei Sewell.
Yeah.
And
from where?
He is from Oregon.
Oregon.
He's from.
So look up his recruiting ranking.
Let's see here.
I'm guessing he was probably high.
A 4-star offensive guard out of high school, number 2 guard nationally, behind Georgia's Jamari Salyer.
So he was a high 4-star. But it's funny, both of them were considered guards coming out of high school.
How about that?
I actually thought Darrisaw was going to play guard coming out of high school. Yeah.
Now, how tall is he again? 6'5"?
6'5", yeah.
So he's not 6'7".
He's not this aircraft carrier like a lot of offensive tackles are. But. Yeah, so it's interesting. 2 of the 3 on that list, not very many schools wanted. think Darisal's only other Division One. Well,
no, he was the only FBS school.
FBS school, yeah. So offensive line recruiting can be tricky.
Well, and that's why again I think Darrisaw could go earlier, just because there's so many teams with young quarterbacks in the NFL. What's the number one thing? You got to have an offensive line to protect them. Is why Sam Darnold didn't work out in New York. So you got to have people up front too. So that's why I could see Darrisaw maybe even going as high as like 10. But let's move over to corner. So we started talking about Caleb Farley. Here's the list I'm looking at from the Athletic. They've got Patrick Surtain of Alabama as the number one corner, followed by J.C. Horn of South Carolina. But what's interesting is I had only seen Farley drop to as low as the number 3 best corner. The Athletic actually has Greg Newsome II of Northwestern jumping
Northwestern
over Farley, and they've got Farley as a first or a second round.
See where Greg Newsome was ranked. You pull that up. Yeah, the Farley thing, man.
What do you think about him sliding, Chris?
It doesn't surprise me. I mean, first round picks are big investments, financial investments for NFL teams. And somebody who didn't play this past year and his best season wasn't even finished because he hurt his back then. That's somewhat questionable. And then it comes out a few weeks ago during Pro Day that he had a back procedure and couldn't participate. My question about that is, why wasn't all that completed early on? Why is that? Why did it take so long? We know
we'll never know.
We'll never know.
Unless he has a successful NFL career and they drill down into that detail later.
Exactly. At the same time, man, if you need a cornerback and you pass on him, I think you're passing on the best physically gifted cornerback in the draft. So it's a risk reward. I think Patrick Surtain, I remember when his dad played for the Dolphins. Crazy.
Yeah.
He's a sure thing. But I also don't think, his ceiling, while very high, I don't think it's as high as Farley's. So Farley might not be a sure thing because of his back, but you've got maybe the best cover corner in the NFL if his back holds up.
And I think he's listed at 6'2", 207.
Yep.
In the NFL, maybe that'll become 210, 215.
Right.
I remember Michael Vick got just a lot bigger and thicker when he went to the NFL, and that happens to a lot of these guys as they mature. So,
by the way, Greg Newsome, the cornerback from Northwestern, who's now kind of jumped over Farley. It's always been Horn, Surtain, and Farley is kind of like the big 3. Newsome was a 3-star recruited by Arkansas, Iowa, Virginia Tech, and others. Yeah. So he was the number 107 ranked recruit out of the state of Florida.
So probably a somewhat upper level 3-star recruit. And Farley himself, I think maybe his only other big offer was like Wake Forest. 247 rated Farley as a 4-star, but that was at the end of the process. He did not have the big offer list and everything. He was very much a under the radar guy until that final ranking came out after he had already signed. So it's interesting to see Northwestern with a couple guys up there. And first of all, it's a really good evaluation and player development by Northwestern.
Pat Fitzgerald.
So let's say the same thing about Virginia Tech here. That's really good evaluation and player development by Virginia Tech when it comes to Darrisaw and Farley, because they were not a couple of recruits that everybody was after, right? So I also wonder, Northwestern, when they announced that $250 million athletic department facility / beachfront resort that they have up there.
Are they getting out of their comfort zone, right?
I don't know, but did it help them with guys like that?
Okay.
That's what I mean. But I think for bang for your buck, I don't know if there's a program that in the Big Ten that gets more from out of who they are than Northwestern. That's like Duke, except way better than Duke, right?
Well, it's when you look at Stanford and Northwestern, that's what Duke and UVA want to be. You're probably too young to remember this, but Northwestern was atrocious when I was young. Mm-hmm. They once, if I remember correctly, they once held the record for 28, 29 losses in a row.
Do you remember in 1995 when they made the Rose Bowl?
Don't get me started.
And that they lost to USC, actually, but it was a big deal that Northwestern made the Rose Bowl. Where did that come from?
Yeah, so Virginia Tech's rise to prominence that year was overshadowed by Northwestern's right. Because Northwestern has so many journalism school graduates that they're in Chicago. They got all the coverage that Virginia Tech ordinarily might have gotten. Instead, Virginia Tech was, who are these hicks from the sticks? And that anybody who lived through that remembers.
They got the Hokies in '95, and right now they've got two players overshadowing two in the 2021 NFL Draft. Want to read this about Farley. Summary on Farley from Dane Brugler. Overall, Farley might have some rough patches early on, and his past injuries are a strong concern. But he has outstanding physical tools with the natural instincts and ball skills to consistently stay in phase and make plays on the ball. He projects as a press man starter with Pro Bowl upside if healthy.
Yeah, I would definitely say that's true. And look, he's going to be rusty. I mean, he hasn't played since mid-November.
The Pittsburgh game was the last football game he's played in, correct? The rain before he sat out the UVA
game? That was the week
game?
before yeah. So that'd be accurate. So
Bud Foster's last home, but no, the goal line stand game.
No. Bud Foster's the
Bud's last game, 2019.
Pouring down rain in the cold.
Yeah, that was his last game.
The shutout. That was the
last time he played in a football game.
That was the shutout. So it was 2017. Never mind. Let's move on.
So the next time he plays in a football game, we'll assume it'll be a preseason game this August of 2021. That'll be 21 months since he's played in a football game. 21 months between football games.
Yeah.
So, and he didn't even practice this past year because he opted out. So there's going to be a certain level of rust there, especially when you move up a level. Like if there were red shirts in the NFL, they'd redshirt him.
Yeah.
Right?
But despite all of this, I didn't see one pundit picking him outside the first round. They're picking him to go late first round, but not outside.
This has him as a number 30 overall from Dane Brugler,
right?
Where he'll go.
Well, this has him 29th by Brugler.
But hey, if he goes later in the first round, guess
Brugler
what?
may have updated it literally last night.
So Farley here is projections: 29, 31, 25, 24, 24, 28, 16, 23. Actually, Walter Football has been going to the Jets at 23.
You know what? Dear God, we need him.
Brugler has him going.
We need corners.
Brugler has him, according to this one, 29th to the Packers.
To your Packers.
There you go.
Which that would be a very high-profile pick for the Packers in the first round. Normally, their first-round pick is some random dude from like Texas A&M Kingsville that you never heard of.
Never to help Aaron Rodgers either. Always.
Always
not a skill position player. So, anyways, by the way, I want to point this out too. Not when you hear people talk about injury history for Caleb Farley. Yes, he's dealing with the back injury. That's the main cause for concern right now. But he did tear his ACL in 2017 when he redshirted. So back injury, torn ACL. He's had a couple of major injuries in his career.
And the back one is definitely the most concerning. Now, he showed in 2019 that his knee was fine.
Yeah.
He was fast and dominant post torn ACL 2 years after that. So I don't think that's a big issue. Well, back injuries can linger though, man.
Yeah.
Like if you hurt your back, yes, it'll hurt. His back's going to hurt later in life, I assume. Now, short term, how much it affects him, I don't know, but sometimes back injuries, they don't necessarily leave you.
That's right.
Let's transition away from the two projected first-round picks to two other players that will hear their name called at some point this week in the 2021 NFL Draft. And let's start with Khalil Herbert, the running back who nobody ever saw play inside of Lane Stadium. The one-and-done transfer from Kansas. As we look here, Pro Football Focus has him as the number 91 overall prospect, the number 5 running back. Here, The Athletic, I'm looking at him as the number 8 overall running back, and Herbert being someone who gets picked in the 4th or the 5th round. But
so if you're the number 5 offensive tackle, you're borderline first round. If you're the number 5 running back, you're way deep in the draft.
Yeah, these days, man, unless you're just like a all-purpose back that can run it, catch it, and just so physically dominant, you're not going in the first round. Maybe not even in the second round.
No, I think the only first-round picks for running backs this year are going to be Najee Harris of Alabama and Travis Etienne of Clemson. And there's a chance they could drop. I mean, it's just you find so much production with these running backs late in the draft. And their shelf life is so small.
I go back and watch the Clemson Virginia Tech game this past year, and Herbert had a great game. And, he had almost 100 yards in that game. And if the game hadn't got out of hand in the fourth quarter, if it had stayed close, he would have had 100, most definitely would have had over 100 yards. And remember, he was coming off an injury too, so who knows how 100% he was. But and then ATN averaged 4.1 yards per carry against Virginia Tech. They completely shut him down.
Yeah, Virginia Tech just did such a good job that game until it fell apart.
Yeah.
So I love PFF's comments about pros about Khalil Herbert. Low center of gravity. Yeah, we know that. Big play after big play last season. Sneaky speed. I love that phrase.
I think the Duke Blue Devils know their sneaky speed.
Yeah,
Khalil Herbert.
He just gets around the corner on you, and he's
and then even when you watch him on TV, he still doesn't look fast. I don't know why he just doesn't look fast.
It took me a few games to get used to realizing how fast he was.
Yeah.
At first, it was like, oh, that'll be a 2 or 3 yard. Whoa!
Right. Yeah, and he still though, like when I look at like his I don't know if it's his running motion or just his physical stature. Even when he's running, I don't think he looks fast. And I'm sitting there like, how are those guys not catching him?
It's. I don't know that you can say the same. I'm trying to think of a parallel.
Sharon Stith is the most comparable running back.
That's true. That's true.
You remember the Miami game when he broke off that long touchdown run in 1999?
Yeah.
Doesn't necessarily look fast when he's doing it.
Yeah.
But nobody caught him.
Yeah.
Right? Now, Herbert's going to be a higher pick than Stith was, most likely. Stith, remember, he declared early and then didn't get picked until the 7th round. That was one of the big
hokey lore
dramas of that draft season because Mel Kiper said it was going to be a first-round pick. So then he declared and then didn't get picked until the 7th round or something like that.
Yeah, he went early.
Yeah. But they're very, very similar. Low center of gravity, 5'9", 212. That's I'll never forget seeing Chiron Stith in person at the 99 spring game, and I was sitting real close, and he runs up the middle, and this defensive back, perfect tackling for him. Couldn't have done it any better. Comes up and puts his shoulder right there, right into his thighs, and Stith just kept going because his center of gravity was so low.
He was a bowling ball.
His thighs were like tree trunks, man.
Yeah.
And Herbert's the same way, the exact same way.
Yeah.
Big play after big play. That wasn't necessarily Stith, but he did have plenty of big plays. Don't call him a one-year wonder. He was dominant in 2019 before leaving Kansas. I thought his film at Kansas was great. So I just think he was limited there by what Kansas as a team was able to do, the players around him and things like that.
And weren't his games like very inconsistent at Kansas, like 150 yards in one game and then?
Well, technically he was their second-string running back.
By the way, Puka
Williams.
Puka Williams is I believe when I was looking. There was a theory that Khalil Herbert left Kansas because of Puka Williams. They were playing Puka Williams instead. Herbert's ranked the number 5 running back, I think, and Puka's down around number 9 or number 10 in one ranking.
Oh, what did Kansas have that they couldn't take advantage of?
Man.
My gosh.
And how did they get him?
Well, nobody wanted him out of high school.
I guess.
I mean, dude, Herbert was like ranked the number 2,200 prospect in the whole country. Nobody wanted this dude. He went to Kansas because he had to go to Kansas.
And that's not even a true ranking. That's just, throw guys in a hat at that point.
Yeah, exactly, which is silly. But, and let's see, he returned kicks. Did Stith return kicks in college?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah. And I remember he returned one for the Jags for a touchdown.
Really?
One time.
Wow.
Yeah. So yeah, I think they're very, very similar players, Chiron Stith and Khalil Herbert. Herbert apparently is more draftable than Stith was.
Well, I think Herbert's running motion is more compact than Stith's.
That might be. That might be true.
I think two things about Herbert. A, he is a redshirt senior. He's a little old. And B, and every site that we're looking at right now, bring this up. He's only caught 10 passes in his career. And you look at the best running back in the NFL right now, Christian McCaffrey. I mean, that dude's almost a slot receiver as well as a running back. So
ATN catches a ton of passes.
And I'm not saying he can't, but I wonder with him and his age, like I saw somewhere he's projected to go to the Giants where they've got Saquon Barkley, who's a top 3 running back. Is he a rotational third down running back?
Yeah.
I mean, I wonder what his role's going to. I don't think he's an every down back in the NFL.
Yeah, these days an every down back is somebody, you can play on running downs passing downs, to catch the ball and everything like that. Now, here's the thing, like, never had more than 10 catches in a season. Is that because he can't catch and can't run routes, or is it because of the teams he was playing on?
See,
Kansas, Les Miles, run.
Right.
Virginia Tech this past year, run, right? So when they did throw it to him, he was productive.
And that's what the pro day is all about. The scouts show up and they get him and they watch his hands and his cuts and that kind of stuff.
To me, like, this isn't phrased properly. Never had more than 10 catches in a season. That's not necessarily a detriment. If they threw to him 10 times and he caught it 10 times.
Caught all 10 passes that were thrown.
There's not enough film of him catching passes.
Right. What like, if it was actually a weakness in the passing game, it would say doesn't have good hands, right? But yeah, I mean, you're right. There's not enough film to prove that it's really a strength, but there's also not enough film to prove that it's a weakness.
Yeah. And one other thing that Dane Brugler brings up, he projects best in a zone-oriented scheme. He had written down that it feels like he's over-reliant on outside runs, with most of his plays ending up at the numbers, whether that was the design or not, which I found kind of interesting because you think about a lot of his runs. I mean, it is kind of east to west, not a lot of north-south. But
I don't care how he picks his yards up.
Hey, he had
1,200 yards is 1,200 yards, buddy.
All right, let's transition to one more prospect. Again, we're looking at Hokies that could be taken or will be taken at this point. The question is where in the upcoming draft this week. And the other one that is for sure going to be taken is the number 7 overall safety in this class from the Athletics named Brugel. That's Divine Diablo, a projected 3rd to 4th round grade. And yes, Akan, he's a redshirt senior, a little bit older. But Will, I feel like if you're an NFL general manager and you see Divine Diablo, who is one of the stronger safeties, I mean, someone who you can just put anywhere, to me, he just feels like the kind of guy that a coach would love to get their hands on.
Yeah, I keep going. I know that the Cam Chancellor comparison is out there. Cam became a much better football player, and he was sometimes playing out of position at Virginia Tech, and he became he reached a very high level once he made the NFL. And I think Divine Diablo was a good college player. So I wonder if he's going to go through the same sort of thing where he really reaches his potential in the NFL.
Cam Chancellor's best season was as a sophomore when he got to play Rover.
Yeah, when they put him in free safety.
The last 2 years, he was good, but he wasn't quite as good.
And he actually started at corner at the very beginning.
Yeah, as a true freshman year, he played corner. Everybody's like, who is this 6'4", 220-pound corner? Remember, like his first 3 days, he was a quarterback, actually.
Yeah.
And remember, you and I actually went out to Tots with Mike Harris.
Yeah. He was covering Virginia Tech for the Richmond Times-Dispatch.
And Mike told us at Tots he had gone to a practice that day, and he was like, "Man, that Chancellor at quarterback, whew, that guy's good."
He was. I can't remember exactly what he said, but he unequivocally said
it was back during the whole Sean Glennon versus Ike Whitaker thing was going on. And I think Mike said something like, everybody thinks Ike Whitaker's going to be the next quarterback. It's not. It's going to be Cam Chancellor. So this guy's just an impressive all-around. He was an impressive all-around athlete, but he finally found his right position in the NFL, which is now, as far as Diablo goes, he had his best season this past year by far when they moved him from free safety to strong safety, and he played on the short side of the field. And I think that's where he'll play in the NFL.
So his PFF grades, we went through Darisaw's earlier. The last 3 seasons, Diablo was a 64.4, a 71.8, and then a 78.9.
Steady improvement, and then a big substantial jump as a senior when he got to move to the short side of the field. I think he'll always be sort of an enigma to me. Like you go back to the Liberty game and those little Liberty slot receivers, which were the same size as me, had big days. And then the next week, he just didn't. How can those guys have good games against Divine Diablo? Like, they were stiff-arming him and Devin Taylor. And then the very next week, the defense goes out there and physically whips Miami.
Yeah.
And he was part of that, getting stiff-armed by Liberty receivers and then physically dominating Miami receivers from 1 week to the next. Now, that's not necessarily just a Divine Diablo thing, because the whole defense was kind of like that. struggled against Liberty and then dominated.
And we've talked
Miami.
about that. We've talked about buy-in,
time.
consistency of effort, and all
right.
that sort of stuff.
And then you fast forward, like those hits he laid, like he never really played as big as he was, as far as physicality. But
I think it's very fair.
Until the UVA game, the last game of his career, when they had that big old quarterback / tight end / running back.
Keontae Thompson?
Yeah. And he knocked him out of the game. I mean, he was physically dominant in that game. And I'm sitting there like, where's this been? Why have you not been laying dudes like this out
It's
your
almost
whole career?
like he was holding something back.
Right. It's really, really strange. And, Fuente gets on the radio after the game and does his famous radio interview that everybody was talking about at the time. And he said, this is how he described Diablo. He said, Divine is such a sweet kid. He might, and he is, he's a really, really nice guy. And sometimes you can be a really, really nice guy and you turn that nice part off on the field. I don't know if he necessarily turns a nice part off completely when he gets on the field.
Well, I've told you a few times that I played 5 years of football, 5th grade through 9th grade, and my biggest flaw is that I wasn't mean enough.
Right.
I was too nice,
One thing I want to point out, by the way, you guys talk about like the scheme, the toughness. Real quick, Pro Football Focus said this. The interception he had against Trevor Lawrence was a pro read in the back of the end zone.
Yeah.
And this is what, out of all the Dane Brugler analysis, this is my favorite one about Diablo. He says, overall, Diablo is physically imposing with his size, speed, and toughness, but he is a linebacker or safety tweener and won't be a fit for every base defense. He projects as a core special teamer and a box safety in a robber scheme.
That is awfully specific.
I mean, that was really specific.
A robber scheme where he can stay down low and read the quarterback and is not going to get exposed deep. He's not going to be running with a receiver down the field with his back turned to the quarterback. Yeah. I think it's a completely accurate description of it. I think what he's got going for him, I think he's a really, really smart guy. And he is obviously a hard worker. All you have to do is look at him.
Yes, we've talked about that many times. He's built. And remember, Jake went to Pro Day and said that he thought Diablo at Pro Day was the one who had advanced his case the most.
I think Diablo was one who, gosh, I could see him going as high as the late 3rd round.
I could also late 2nd.
I mean, he's such. Yeah, I mean, you've got a pretty good upside there, and all it takes is one team to say, "Oh God, look at that dude! What can we turn him into?" Right?
Get a man crush on him.
Right, exactly. But at the same time, there are the negatives that I talked about earlier, like the production in college, the physical production, like as far as tackling and hitting and just being physically dominant, never matched up to what he looked like, and that could slide him down the board. Like I think he could drop to like the 6th round. I think he could be a 3rd round.
Be a steal.
I just don't know.
I think Diablo, though, is the kind of guy. Think about teams that are really good defensively right now who are missing a piece. Like, think about, like, the 49ers and how great that defense. Like, I could totally see him being like, we've got the pass rushers, linebackers. Here's another piece that we can use in a specific role.
Right.
Or a Seattle Seahawks, right? Like, Pete Carroll's the one who discovered Cam Chancellor. They've got Jamal Adams. Like, anyway, I feel like he's a team that might go to a contender that's already really good on defense.
Right. But it gets into this whole thing of sometimes it's better to be a free agent than to be picked late. If somebody just kind of, oh, well, he's still there, we'll just take him, without that kind of analysis that you just added to it. Sometimes it's better to pick a team as a free agent that will maximize their use of you.
Sort of, when you talk about that, a specific role, I think about Anthony Shigog, who played for Virginia Tech in 2013 through 2016. When he was a senior in 2016, Bud Fall, he was a really good player, but he was 6'3", 225 pounds. Not really a safety, not really a linebacker. Yeah. But Bud Foster found a very specific role for him in his 30 package, which is, his advanced way of saying my dime package. We have 6 defensive backs on the field at one time. And Chicago would get out there and he would play kind of a shallow safety role and never turned his back to the quarterback where he was running with receivers downfield. It was kind of I don't know, it was a very, very specific role for him, and he excelled in that role as a senior. So that's something you're describing, like a contender come in and say, man, we really need somebody who can play like a shallow safety role. Like we can take a linebacker off the field and basically replace him with a linebacker who's much, much better in coverage. And yeah, I could certainly see that.
It's got to be, but with the size of NFL rosters, it's got to be a team that,
is ready. Yeah. And again, not that I know anything, I'm just thinking about it. He could be really good in a specific role right away. And again, if Farley were to drop, by the way, I was thinking about this too. Again, if you're dropping to a later first-round pick, what does that mean? You're going to a
better team.
And there's one thing that I love to listen to Colin Cowherd, and I think he's spot on when he says this. Like 80% of how your NFL career goes is what team drafts you and the situation you go into. A lot of people aren't bust because the talent's not there. It's because you didn't have great coaching. You've got a GM that's fired. I mean, there's a big difference going to the Jets or going to the Patriots.
Yeah, and I hope he gets drafted high from a money standpoint and a notoriety standpoint, but at the same time, he's going to be so rusty that
you're talking about
Farley, and there's going to be a lot of pressure on him as a first-round pick. If he goes to a team that just throws him out there as a starter from day one, and like I think he has great long-term potential, but I don't think he's going to get right off the bus in the NFL and start dominating simply because he's missed so much time.
Well, D'Angelo Hall didn't.
So I think if he goes to one of these teams in the later first round, it's less likely that he starts, and they can slowly, gradually work him into things and let him kick off the rust.
Yeah.
Because a first-round pick, man, it's going to be like, we expect great production from this guy from day one. And you might not get it, quite frankly, and then fans are going to be all over him, like, this guy's a bust, this guy's a bust. But you got to think, the guy hadn't played in 2 years, right? So I think it would be beneficial for someone who has a late first-round pick who can work him in slowly. Don't necessarily need him to start from day one.
Well, the Hokies would certainly love to have a guy like Caleb Farley back for this upcoming season, but the secondary might be a strength this year with some returners. We're going to transition away from talking about the Hokies and the NFL draft to big picture questions for the 2021 season for Virginia Tech football. We're going to step aside for a break. When we come back, we'll discuss that next. You're watching and listening to episode 178 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Welcome back into episode 178 of the Tech Sideline Podcast. Truly is great to have all of you with us. Evan Hughes back with Chris Coleman and Will Stewart. Behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart. We're about to transition from talking about what Hokies could hear their name called this week for the NFL draft to talking about big picture questions for Virginia Tech football. But before we do that, one final thought on the NFL draft with Will Stewart.
Right. So I meant to slip this in while we were still talking about the draft. We were talking about specific players. This is a general comment. This is a big draft for Justin Fuente and his staff because I don't have the time to scroll down the list, but Virginia Tech had a player drafted every year from sometime in the early 90s, 92, 93, 94.
I want to say like 93.
That sounds right. It sort of started
maybe 94.
Kind of when the bowl streak started.
But
Ken Brown got drafted.
It would have been Drakeford and Jim Pine in the 94 draft. Yeah.
So in 2019, when no Hokies were selected, that broke a long string of Virginia Tech having draft selections every year. Mm-hmm. 2020, there was only one player selected. That was Dalton Keene, who was a Fuente recruit. Mm-hmm. You go back to 2018 when the Hokies had 5 guys selected. They were the Edmonds brothers, Tim Settle, Wyatt Teller, and Greg Stroman, all Beamer recruits. Mm-hmm. So this is a huge draft for Fuente to be able to say, these are my guys. These are guys that we recruited and developed. Right. Now, clearly, I'm not talking about Khalil Herbert because he transferred in. But Darrisaw,
you can these days you can make that claim.
Well, that's true. They're going to. But Darasaw and Farley in particular were recruited by Fuente's staff and developed by Fuente's staff. So this is a big draft for him.
It is, and I think the lack of players drafted in 2018 and 19 kind of shows what a talent gulf there was in the program.
2019 and 2020.
2019 and 2020. Like, only one player drafted in those 2 years, and that was a Fuente recruit who left early.
Yeah.
Right? So most of Fuente's recruits, they weren't even at a draftable age at that point. So, like, that last Beamer recruiting class was just not
either really good or
well, yeah, exactly. There were a few guys in that class that were so good, that they left early, but for the most part, there wasn't much there. And we had always heard that Fuente told Witt, like, after the 2017 season or something like that, he was like, "Man, all my guys are either redshirt freshmen or true sophomores, and the guys that are older than them, they just aren't any good, and 2018 is going to be a long year."
Yeah.
Like, they saw that come in advance. There wasn't anything you could do about it. Yeah. You just got to get through it. And then, they got through it and, had a good year in 2019. Now they need to have a good one in 2020. But, yeah, I think those two drafts really show the depth of talent.
The transition from one program to another.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, we have some big picture questions about the 2021 season because the last couple of podcasts about the last month we've done position previews going in to the upcoming season for Tech football. Now big picture questions. So we've got a window of about 15 minutes. Mm-hmm. So I want to go kind of rapid fire a little bit because I've got about 10 of them for you guys, and there's a couple already in the chat that I'll throw in there as well. So big picture questions, 2021 season. Hard to believe we're only a couple months away from the season getting underway. So, Chris, let me start with you on this. Again, kind of rapid fire here. What is the biggest question mark you have going into this season for Virginia Tech right now?
Who's going to generate big plays on offense? Khalil Herbert obviously generated quite a few of them this past year. James Mitchell will generate some, of course. I think the X's and O's of the offense itself will generate some, but essentially, Alabama generates big plays not because their offensive coordinator is a genius, but because Alabama has a bunch of first-round picks, right? Yeah. Same thing for Clemson. So, what player or players is going to step up for Khalil Herbert? Ideally, one of them, somebody at running back would be able to generate some, but the receivers have to do more.
Yeah,
and that's what really concerns me.
So for me, 1B is health of the quarterback. I think Burmeister's got a chance to have a pretty good season if he stays healthy. 1A is maybe a little more off the beaten path from what most people are thinking, but the kicking game. Field goals, punting, everything. We did the special teams preview, and it was short because there's nobody in the program. I'm exaggerating, but, there wasn't a whole lot to talk about. So I think that's big.
Okay, what is the biggest strength of this team, Will Stewart, as we record on Monday, April 26th?
I'm going to go with, and I think I said this a couple of podcasts ago, I'm in love with that defensive line, the defensive tackles. I think the potential there is tremendous.
I'll go cornerback. I think their starting talent is very, very good with Jermaine Waller and Dorian Strong. I think they've got two backups with a lot of starting experience, and I think Breon Murray, he didn't have a great year last year, but he was a guy who really never played corner before. He was always a safety type, nickelback type in the past. So I think he can still improve, and I think Armani Chapman's a good player. So I think their overall depth at cornerback is really good.
All right, let's spend some time on this question here. If the Hokies are going to be a contender for the ACC title this year, this player not named Braxton Burmeister has to be critical in the success of the team. Chris Coleman, you're up first.
Trey Turner. Trey was a highly regarded recruit. Virginia Tech beat out Florida State and basically every big program on the East Coast for him. And he came in and had a really good true freshman season and was leveled off. Pretty much the same production each year, 30 to 35 catches. We got to have more from Trey Turner. he's a solid player, but like if you put him on the 2016 team, he would be the fourth option behind Cam Phillips, Isaiah Ford, and Bucky Hodges, right? So he has to raise his game this year, and he's got to get bigger and stronger, and he's got to be more productive in the pass game. He's got to generate more big plays in the passing game.
I'm going to go on the other side of the ball, and I really can't narrow it down to one guy. I'm going to list two guys, Alan Tisdale and Dax Hollyfield. We just talked about how much we love the defensive line and the corners. Safety we're not sure about. But the middle of that defense, the part that's missing is how are the Mike and the backer going to play?
What does a Virginia Tech offense successfully running through Braxton Burmeister look like?
I think a lot. I think we'll continue a whole lot of the smoke and mirrors approach. And not necessarily because of Burmeister, but because of everybody else. I actually don't worry about Burmeister. I think he'll be okay. What like in a vacuum, but like who's he going to be handing the ball off to and who's he going to be throwing it to? I think that's going to decide how effective Braxton Burmeister is. So I don't think it'll look too different than what we've seen already. It's just, are the players there, or is the supporting cast going to be able to make enough plays to support him?
I think that the read option game, the running game that involves the quarterback, I think it's going to be outstanding. I think his decision making is very good. I think the passing game will be more of a controlled passing game unless they pull tricks to, sometimes you see James Mitchell running down the field wide open, and that scheme and matchups. So I like the running game that involves the quarterback. I like the short passing game. I don't know that you're going to see much of a deep passing game, maybe if Payute gets healthy. Maybe, but even then, can Burmeister, hit him downfield? So,
speaking of Payute, this could be an answer to the next question. This Virginia Tech player did not play in 2020 or didn't have the best season in 2020, but will have a great 2021 campaign.
It's very tempting to say Payute, but at the same time, I don't want to put any pressure on a redshirt freshman who has spent much of the last 2 years hurt, hasn't gotten much chance to practice and everything like that. I think he's got big-time talent. Like, he's got Caleb Farley level wide receiver long-term ceiling talent, but he's still very, very early in his career and hasn't been able to practice very much. Very tempting to say him. And I'm trying to think if there's somebody who maybe didn't have a great 2020 season.
Jermaine Waller.
That's a good, yeah. Waller's my answer, yeah.
Transitioning, let's see here. I just had a thought and then lost it real quick. Okay. We will know how good the Virginia Tech Hokies are by this point in the season.
You would have to look at the schedule.
I would just say, I'm going to say West Virginia game. I think, this staff has a history of their teams play very, very, very well that first week, the first big game of the season, either in week 1 or week 2, where it's all about preparation in the offseason and X's and O's and not necessarily about, players, because scouting reports aren't out. Like, Virginia Tech went out to FedEx Field and beat a pretty good West Virginia team with a bunch of freshmen on offense, right? And they wouldn't have beat West Virginia a month later, in my opinion. But West Virginia they didn't have Josh Jackson scouted, they didn't have Dalton Keene scouted, or any of those freshmen. So Tech won the game. So I wouldn't shock me if Tech went out and beat UNC in week 1, just simply because Tech is always so well prepared for that first big game. Now the counterpoint to that is UNC plays Tech every year, so they already know Tech's personnel. Right. So maybe not. But let's say, Tech does go out and play well against UNC and wins. You get to that West Virginia game, and at that point more film is out. I guess 3 games worth of film at that point is out probably. How do they play against West Virginia when more information about Tech's personnel is known? Can they get over that hump? So I think we'll know how good the team is after the West Virginia game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think I would almost say disregard what happens in that North Carolina game. If Virginia Tech wins it, could be fool's gold.
It's possible.
That doesn't mean don't enjoy it. Win over UNC is enjoyable, but it might not say a whole lot about the rest of the season. I'm going to go even further than that. So UNC, Middle Tennessee at WVU,
So it's the
Richmond, Notre Dame, and Pittsburgh. I know it's deep in the season, but I'm going to have a feel for this team after the Pittsburgh game.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I wish I'm glad the West Virginia game is the third game rather than the fourth game.
And why is that?
I mean, if they were the fourth game, it'd be 3 games worth of film instead of
so
just
you
be
want
2.
less.
And who's the second game?
Middle Tennessee.
Yeah, so hopefully Tech can get through that one without playing their hand too much.
I don't know. I say that, but like 6 of their first 7 games are at home, and then you go on the road.
Yeah. Sometimes you think you know something about a team, and then it turns out you don't. We thought we knew something about Virginia Tech when Duke came in and smashed them on the Thursday night that Friday night game, 45-10. Clearly, we didn't.
Well, that's a frontier Fuente's got to clear. Is getting more consistent effort week in, week out.
Correct.
Speaking of Coach Fuente, Will, how many games must Coach Justin Fuente win to win back the majority of the fan base in 2021?
Depending upon the majority, 9. And again, this is me just commenting on the fan base reaction. So one of the things that came out of the Reach for Excellence campaign is that they are outlining how much more support Fuente is going to get from the university and the athletic department, and that puts more pressure on him. And we know that this money that's getting allocated is something that will increase over time, and the benefits will increase over time. The Twitterati won't care.
Twitterati. I'm sorry, that's hilarious.
Well, I use that all the time.
I've never heard that before.
Really?
You should trademark. That's hilarious. I'm sorry.
So the
Twitterati.
No, the Twitterati, if it's less than 9, and it depends on what the 9 looks like.
Yeah.
But anything that becomes 8, 7, or 6 wins, there's just too much fodder there. So
yeah, and the real interesting thing is the thing about the Reach for Excellence campaign, so geared towards football, and it was basically an hour press conference and Q&A session where Virginia Tech basically said, we haven't been supporting football properly. We haven't given Justin Fuente the resources that his competition is giving their head coaches. So when you admit that, you say the product on the field this year is going to be the culmination of 5 years of below average support. But then if he doesn't win a certain amount of games, you fire him? Even after you say, we didn't properly support him? So this is kind of a paradox, right? So what do you do? My answer is I don't know. To me, it's
remember the question was win back the majority of the fan base.
Of the fans. Generally when the majority of a fan base turns on a head coach, I mean, speak honestly and openly about it, generally they never come back.
They don't come back.
They don't come back.
Yeah.
They lock on to what they believe, whether it's correct or incorrect,
right?
And that's their story from now on. Sometimes it turns out to be true, and sometimes it's sort of a false narrative. But we'll see. But I would agree with it that 9 is the answer, and that's a different question than how many games does he have to win to keep his job.
Right.
Okay, 2 more. What freshman are you most excited to watch this year besides Jaden Payute? Because I think everybody's going there. Everyone's excited to see him. Give me a freshman, red shirt or true, most excited to see this year.
Boy.
That will not be red shirting, sadly, for Chris Coleman. Do you think we'll be playing?
It'll be playing. If I thought with 100% certainty that DJ Harvey would be playing, assuming he's going to be playing corner, I think it'd be hard. It's going to be hard to break into that top 4 this year. Besides Jaden Payute, I'm going to assume that Jalen Jones is going to play wide receiver, and I think I'll be pretty excited to see him. Robert Wooten will still technically be, he'll be a true freshman again this year. And Wooten is a guy who I thought, breaking into the playing rotation last year was impressive, considering he spent most of August camp quarantine with all the other true freshmen and didn't know the system, so he had no idea what to do when he got on the field. I thought, considering all that, he was pretty good. Spring practice under his belt, no COVID, hopefully during fall camp. He should be ready to take a step forward.
I just pulled up the list while Chris was talking of the 2021 signees, and I got nothing. I don't know. I don't want to say that anybody.
Parker Clemens.
Yeah.
Parker Clemens is
who's from the year before, correct?
I mean, he was a true freshman this past year.
Yeah.
Yeah. 2020 class.
That's a good one.
Because he's a guy who's sort of being. I've heard as much positive things about him through his first year on campus as I did about Luke Tenuta his first year on campus.
Okay. Final question. Fun one. Will there be couches burned in Morgantown this year?
I've always said that when I retire to get some pocket money, I'm going to open a used furniture store.
Now wait a minute. Are they happy in their burning couches, or they're mad?
They're going to burn.
So I don't as a young Hokie, like I don't remember. I've heard stories.
I think they've. Oh God, it's just dumpsters on fire, couches on fire. Like that's what they do after a big game, or that's what they used to do after a big game in Morgantown, win or lose. Just set stuff on fire.
I think couches will burn. This is the first time in 16 years they'll be in Morgantown, playing in Morgantown.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Like I think West Virginia's out-of-state students are going to be like, what's the big deal?
Yeah,
it's just some team from another state. The in-state students that go to West Virginia, especially if they're like parents went to WVU, they'll know. Yeah. I don't think your average Virginia Tech student understands what the history of the rivalry.
Yeah, that's true. The last time they played in 2017, they played in Morgantown in 2005, and that was the whole Marcus Vick thing,
right?
It's
interesting though that like these days teams, it's just the majority of players are from out of state.
Yeah.
So how much are Virginia Tech players, and conversely, how much are West Virginia players? It's not going to be like a old school Tech West Virginia game. I'll put it.
That's basically my question I was getting to.
Yeah, but everybody on both sides completely grasp the history of it. Number one, those teams were playing every year back then, so it was all built up. It got passed down from one class to another, and now so many guys come from out of state, and the teams hardly ever play anymore.
Right.
That I don't think you'll see any of that this year. Probably see some from Doug Nestor. I think he understands it, unfortunately.
That's right. Doug Nestor will. That's going to crush Chris Coleman,
this
folks.
guy, I know.
It's good. It's September 24th, 2022 is going to be interesting. That's when West Virginia comes to Blacksburg.
Well, anyways, that'll be fun to look at. All right, real quick. I just want to mention this before we get to the questions that we have. First off, if you're watching, we have 25 likes right now. If you're listening or watching archive too, I mean, please like and subscribe and comment, please. Let's see if we can get that number up. Great questions in the chat. We're going to get to those in just a moment. But last week, you guys did a tremendous job of covering the Reach for Excellence campaign initiative that Virginia Tech Athletics is rolling out. Episode 177, Will hosted with Charlie Flieger and Brad Worthman. It is such a great podcast. So I just want to take a quick moment real quick. Will, it's been about a week since it's been announced. You did the podcast with Charlie and Brad. A week removed, what are your thoughts about the Reach for Excellence campaign, takeaways from the podcast, and why should Hokie fans go listen to that podcast if they haven't already?
First of all, I'm going to put all of this into a Monday Thoughts article, the rare off-season Monday Thoughts article that I'm writing, most of which I wrote last night. So, your question is, now that it's had time to settle it a little bit, what do you think? It actually occurred in an email exchange that Charlie Flieger and I had afterwards. We were doing the whole exchanging thank yous thing, and he said that he perceives this. He wrote that he perceives this as a turning point in Virginia Tech athletics to avert Virginia Tech athletics from mediocrity. And so the big takeaway is that and Charlie actually said this on the podcast, there is an alignment occurring between university leadership, from the president to the board of visitors to the financial people down into the athletic department, that recognizes the importance of athletics and specifically financially supporting athletics. And one of the things I'm going to write in my article, I don't remember exactly how I phrase it, is, and people at Tech may not agree with this, but this is my perception on the outside looking in, that when it came to athletic fundraising, the Hokie Club was on its own. in the past. And that is not true anymore. So when they talk, Evan, when they talk about going from raising 30 to 33 million a year to raising 50 to 53 million a year, it's easy to just say, oh, we're going to do this. But the reason they're confident they can do it is they have alignment from the top on down. University development is working through the Hokie Club as opposed to the Hokie Club being over here. And Charlie Flieger's a rock star. He's very good at what he does. He knows what he's looking at.
Came here from an Ivy League school.
And as I said at the beginning of the podcast, could be making 2, 3, or 4 times somewhere else what he's making here.
Absolutely.
He's here because he cares and he wants to make it work. And he's put a lot of time in on breaking down barriers and getting rid of the mistrust and getting everybody pointed in the same direction. Now, I want to be clear, and this will be the last point I make in my article. Does that mean Virginia Tech is going to be an annual top 10 football program and making the CFP every year? That's not what I'm saying. Virginia Tech is better poised to operate at maximum efficiency and be the best it can be. That's my big takeaway from it.
Yeah, I think everybody being on the same page between academics and athletics is huge. I think he would never claim credit for this, but I think Paul Torgerson saved the football program in 2000.
Yeah.
And I think Tim Sands might have just saved the football program. He might have done the same thing. So for all the flack Tim Sands gets sometimes, I think in 10, 20 years we might look back and say, man, that guy really, really did us a favor there.
Yeah, and all the work is being done by Charlie and all the heavy-duty work. Mm-hmm. But Tim could have stood in the way of it. He could have said,
he could have said no.
Yeah.
He could have said no.
And he didn't.
And he was very supportive. So I think that's one point I want to make that I actually hadn't thought about till right now. To me, the whole announcement was kind of it's the closing of a chapter that has been in the process of being written since last January when Fuente flirted with Baylor. And
January 2020.
January 2020. Yeah, so you're talking 15 months.
Yeah.
And to me, it was really hard to focus on the 2020 season for a lot of reasons. Number one, because of we were mentally worn out by the start of football season just from spending the whole summer worrying that whether there would be a football season. But number two, I'm very much a long-term thinking guy. You have to be, like when you sit in an office all day and that's your full-time job. I mean, you can't focus on one game or one season or one play or everything like that. I mean, you have to always be thinking long-term. And to me, what was done last week, it's a long-term play that really needed to happen. The 2020 football season is just a blip on the radar in the long term. Whether we had gone 10-0 or no, whether we'd gone 11-0 or 5-6 or whatever, it wouldn't have changed anything from a long-term perspective, is what I mean.
Right.
It doesn't matter who the football coach is. Doesn't matter. I mean, because the next head coach, whenever Fuente is gone for whatever reason, the next coach is would come in and demand the same things that Justin Fuente has now asked for since flirting with Baylor. So to me, it's the public acknowledgement of everything I wrote last January when he almost went to Baylor.
Shot across the bow.
It took 15 months, but it was basically the Virginia Tech administration coming out and saying everything that I wrote last January. So it's a little bit of personal vindication to me to a certain extent. But
so one of the things that I say in my article is that, we have observed and documented and commented on the decline of this football program for a decade now. Mm-hmm. From that 2011 season. It started in 2011. And there are a number of factors that go into it. The rise of the Big Ten and SEC networks, the building of facilities by other programs, the Nick Saban staffing model. We've gradually, we being me and you and Virginia Tech fans, have been gradually realizing all of this stuff and how Virginia Tech was falling behind. And finally, this stuff has all been addressed. I feel like it's bottomed out and things are starting to turn in the other direction.
It took, and honestly, the three most important positions of university president, athletic director, and head football coach there was a time basically where Charles Steger, Jim Weaver, and Frank Beamer were all approaching 70 years old, and they were still working. And Weaver had Parkinson's disease, so he wasn't 100% effective the last few years of his career. Steger was under pressure from the lawsuit.
Over 2007.
Over 2007, from what we understand, probably would have retired sooner, but if he had done that, he would have lost his university protection from the lawsuit. Yes, so he stayed working longer than he wanted to. So combine that with Frank Beamer, who was past his prime at that point. So your three key figures, it was all very much guys it was kind of limping to the finish line, right? Yeah. And they weren't thinking big picture. And we basically spent the better part of a decade like that. And this is where we are as a result. We're not here because, Justin Fuente's offensive coordinator is Brad Cornelsen.
And he's a terrible play caller.
Right, yeah.
That's not the problem.
This has been stemming for a decade.
Evan is laughing.
I'm thinking of the word Twitterati.
So to me, it's almost like, like I said, it's the end of a chapter in a book. It's that press conference and the subsequent coverage and even this podcast today, it's almost like a season finale. And now everybody takes some time off and comes back after the summer and a new chapter gets started. But so to me, man, it's all about looking ahead. Yes, there have been mistakes in the past. And I think it's important to acknowledge those mistakes from a historical perspective. But there's no reason to harp on them and complain about them anymore.
And here's an example of what he just talked about. So there's this debate of, did the program fall behind because Virginia Tech's leadership and Whit Babcock was clueless about what it took to win at football? Was Justin Fuente clueless and didn't know? Or did Fuente know the whole time and Whit wasn't giving him the resources he needed? Or was Whit saying, Justin, whatever you need, let me know, and Justin wasn't saying anything? I don't care anymore. I just don't care.
Did Frank Beamer fire his assistants after 92, or did Dave Brain make him?
Did Dave Brain make him?
That argument has been hashed out for 30 years now, and there's not a definite answer to it. So, but ultimately, who cares? Yeah. He did, and whatever problem there was, they figured out and moved on, and we won a lot of football games. So. Yeah. At this point, it's time to look forward.
Yep.
All right, I have two more questions I want to ask, one for each, quickly. Chris, 60 seconds. I think that for any person watching this, you need to go to techsideline.com. You need to read two things. Will's Monday Thoughts article that's going to come out later today, and Chris's article from last week titled "The Virginia Tech Fan Base Has a Decision to Make." People in the comments, Chris, some were saying it was one of the most impactful articles you've ever written.
Well, I basically spent the last 15 months writing it in my head.
So let me ask you this. In 60 seconds, explain what you wrote about in this article and what you're asking.
Kind of what I just said.
What we just said.
Stop looking back and move forward.
Yeah.
And get involved with donating in some
Get
ways.
involved with donating, because this is basically head coaches come and go. Players come and go. Athletic directors come and go. They're all temporary. Some last longer than others, but they're all temporary. But the fan base remains. The fan base is the most important thing to the long-term health of a football program. So, in effect, this is a competition between Clemson fans and UNC fans and Virginia Tech fans.
And Florida State fans. I'll throw them in.
And to this point, Virginia Tech fans, and I'm issuing, this is a bit of a challenge here. It's not meant to be rude or disrespectful, but for 2 decades, all I heard is, oh, Hokie Nation's the best because we jumped in, or Sandman, and we're loud on Saturdays. These days, what makes you the best fan base is whether you can keep up with other fan bases from a fundraising standpoint. So that's the challenge. Do you want to be a big-time football program, or do you not? And we're going to find out the answer over the course of the next 5 years. If Virginia Tech can, if their fans want to be like Clemson fans. Dabo Swinney was a good football coach, but in his third year, he went 6-7, just like Justin Fuente. And if they really got their fundraising efforts rolling, and now they can pay coordinators God knows what.
Or start a softball program and be great in their first year.
Scratch. And, it's just how good do you want to be?
Yeah.
And right now it's the athletic administration. They've presented the vision. They've told you the obstacles. They've told you the goals and asked you for help. And and I'll close it like I closed the article. Like, are you going to help? Or in the end, are you not going to help? And when things don't work, you just deflect the blame to the people who need your help to succeed.
Yeah.
That's what it's all about.
Again, that's on Tech Sideline right now. Final thought on this, Will. I'm curious because you're on the message boards a lot. You're on Twitter and the Twitterati. A week to digest it all. What do you think the reaction was amongst the fans to the announcement, the way it was rolled out, the podcast, like overall thoughts on how the fan base perceived it?
I thought it was surprisingly positive. I expected there was an element that said, I don't care what you're doing. Fuente's still your head coach, #fire Fuente.
Right.
There was a little bit of that, but really not much.
Not as much as I thought. My bigger concern is like how many people have checked out and actually haven't even read anything about it right now.
Well, that's entirely possible, too.
Some people check out in the off season, and like we see it on our site. It's like they do monthly subscriptions, and as soon as either football or basketball season is over, they stop their subscription, and then they start it again in August, and they don't pay any attention to Virginia Tech things in the off season at all.
Yeah,
so when they come back in August and they see people talking about that on the boards, they're going to be like, what happened? What's that? Right?
Yeah, so it's going to be an ongoing process.
It's going to be an ongoing educational process.
But I thought, as I said repeatedly, of course, a lot of the attention went to the Castle Coliseum renovation because those were the snazzy drawings that got produced. And there's a lot of the number 400 million is big, but there are a lot of subtleties to what they're trying to do.
It's not an extra 400 million on what top.
It's 400 million instead of 250 million, which
Correct.
is what would ordinarily be raised.
It was what you would ordinarily raise in that time frame. So basically, after all the extra donations come in, all the financial restructuring, if they can get in-state scholarship or out-of-state scholarships to count as in-state scholarships, you're talking an extra $25 to $35 million a year in operating budget for the athletic department.
Yeah,
and,
on $100 million
and
operation,
a substantial amount of which will be invested into the football.
Yes.
All right, let's transition into some great YouTube questions that we have. Again, if you're watching, we appreciate you doing so. Live or archive, please give us a like and a subscribe. And let's start with a question from Billy Parvanum. Could you guys put Sean Glennon's career into perspective? Obviously not as talented as Vic or Tyrod, but he has to be up there as among the most successful Virginia Tech quarterbacks with 2 ACC championships, right? With a question mark.
I'm a little bit biased. When we had our TSL beer event in Northern Virginia a couple years ago, out of the former players who got invited, Sean Glennon was the only one that shows up.
Yeah.
And we've always had a great relationship with Sean. Sean, sometimes maybe his pocket awareness was a little bit slow reacting, but he also had a wretched pass blocking offensive line in front of him, quite frankly. I think if he played behind a Vance Vice coached offensive line, I think Sean Glennon could seriously do some damage in the passing game. He did plenty of damage in the passing game when he had good receivers. Didn't have a great senior year because all his receivers were freshmen, but that's the year Tyrod's numbers dropped off too.
Right.
And he had more turnovers than touchdowns as a sophomore. So, I think Glennon was a talented player who could really push the ball down the field. I think he's one of those guys who, if he had played in a different era with a different offensive line.
Well, if he had been a mid-90s Virginia Tech quarterback.
Oh, yeah.
One thing that you'd have to look up the exact size, but Sean Glennon is basically as big as Jim Druckenmiller.
A little bigger. Druckenmiller was listed at
6'3",
6'4", 221, and Glennon was like 6'4", 227, 230 something. I mean, Sean was a big guy.
I always thought that Sean was just his timing was bad. He was
you
bad
could
fit for
it's a
VT
little
at
like
the time.
It's a little bit. You could say the same for Druckenmiller. Like Druckenmiller's senior year, he didn't have the receivers. Like if you put either one of those guys, if you take the 2005 through 2007 receivers, the Eddie Royals, the Josh Morgans, and Justin Harpers, and that group, and you combine it with the 96 offensive line, right? You put either one of those quarterbacks out there with that offense, and you're not going to be able to stop it.
Yeah. So I mean, Sean's brother Mike went to NC State, wound up having a good career at NC State, and I think he's still in the NFL.
Still in the NFL.
Yeah,
Yep.
you know. And I wonder if that could have been Sean's career path if he had gone somewhere different.
The thing I'll always hate about the Glennon era is like his mom stopped going to games because she couldn't stand the verbal abuse
That Sean took.
Yeah. And
nobody was abusing her. Sean was taking the abuse.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So I like I said, I'm a big Sean Glennon fan for a lot of reasons. I think the timing was poor for him to achieve his ceiling at Virginia Tech.
Yep.
All right, a couple other questions. Kate Anderson, excuse me. Who do you think takes a big step forward in the ACC this year in football?
In football. I think everybody would say North Carolina, but I don't think that's going to happen.
People talk about Virginia Tech's lost production on offense, and I know UNC's got a great quarterback coming back, but how are they going to replace those two running backs? They had two Khalil Herberts.
And Diami Brown and Daz Newsome are gone.
I mean so they got a great quarterback coming back, but you can't tell me that the replacements are going to be as good. If they are, I'll be mighty impressed.
I don't know that anybody is to answer the question.
Did Kenny Pickett come back or is he gone?
He's gone.
He's gone, so they're going to take a step back, I think.
Gosh, yeah.
Miami's quarterback, he's gone?
Derek King's coming back, but he's coming off that injury. Remember?
That's
right at the very end of the season.
I would say maybe Miami, but it's Miami. How can you actually pick them to do something
they'll be bothered
like that?
by
I'm sorry. Kenny Pickett is returning.
He is
in
returning.
2021.
So, all right, so he can throw the ball around. So here's the sad part about Pickett. Like, they used to be able to run the ball really, really, really well, and then they had a big drop off in running back and offensive line talent. And now that he's an experienced player and a good player, now they can't run the ball.
Yeah.
So it's really hard for any program to be consistently good at all spots. But like, if they get their running game back to Pitt standards, then maybe Pitt.
Okay, there you go. Richie, kind of wishing we played an Atlantic team first game if we had to open up with a conference game, preferably someone we don't play every year.
Yep.
Good comment. I agree. Ronnie Adams, not sure how much y'all have studied the mock drafts. What team do you hope or think Darisaw and Farley go to?
I don't watch much NFL anymore, so I don't know if I have a hope. I will go, like I said earlier about Farley. I do kind of hope he goes later to a place where he doesn't have to start and can be developed and slowly kind of gotten back into the groove, so to speak, because he's got to be rusty. I hope he doesn't go somewhere where they throw him into the fire as a full-time starter right away and he's rusty and doesn't play well and the fan base gets on him and the pressure builds up because he was a first-round pick, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, so like I said, a couple of these drafts have Darisaw going to Washington, and I'm a Dolphins fan, not a Washington fan, but I know that there are a lot of Washington fans among Hokie fans, and why not?
And he's from Upper Marlboro, Maryland.
Yeah, so that'd be
try saying that. I think it'd be a hometown team for him, and I don't know if he's a Redskins. There I go. I don't know if he's a Washington football team fan or not, but
probably.
I think even if it was not, it would be cool for him to play close to where his family can come see him play and everything like that. So I don't know if this is what he wants, but from the outside looking in, I think that would be great if he could play for them.
I think so. The Athletic, Darisaw going 17th to the Raiders in Vegas. Caleb Farley of the Packers at 29, Divine Diablo 72 overall of the Lions, and Khalil Herbert 196 of the Giants.
Las Vegas is not something a 21-year-old who just came into obscene amounts of money for the first time in his life should spend his rookie season.
Not a good idea.
No.
I think that Washington would be a good spot for Darisaw. Offensive line-wise, I believe they're bringing back Riley Reif. They've got a decent O-line. He probably will have a rookie quarterback or a young quarterback within year one or year two of his career, so they start young. Farley to the Packers would be interesting. That would be an interesting.
Well, the Packers are, they've got they have a cornerback need, or sure, I mean, who doesn't, I guess, but that's a team where he wouldn't be thrown in to the fire immediately. unless he comes in and just completely dominates, in which case everything I said was invalidated, right? Yeah.
You also said hope. I'll be honest with you. If Farley slides to 20s, Jets are taking him at 23. I'll just be honest because I think Surtain's off the board, Horn's off the board, dire need of cornerbacks. And so hopefully next Monday or whenever we do our next podcast, I'll come on.
You
with
would be
as a Jets fan, there are special days of the year. I mean, you seem
no, there's not. That's the thing. There's not.
No, you seem like a Christmassy guy to me. So you probably like Christmas, right?
I like Christmas. Thanksgiving's my favorite holiday.
Okay. So Thanksgiving, Christmas, NFL Draft Day.
NFL Draft Day. I sat in my dorm. Not that anybody cares, but I'll say this and we'll move on. I sat in my dorm 2018 draft, right? And Jets get Sam Darnold. I'm screaming. I mean, I ordered his jersey next. I'm
back.
Like, we're set for the next 10 to 15 years. And here I am, 3 years later, folks. I still will not have my diploma from Virginia Tech yet. And the Jets are drafting a quarterback at number 2.
Again.
So, anyways,
that picture you sent this past season was hilarious when the Jets were winning a game, and the picture of watching the Jets game when the Jets are winning and the guy's already wearing a Trevor Lawrence Jets jersey, and he's just like, we're winning.
I was crushed when the Jets lost out of the number 1 pick, just absolutely crushed. So, anyways, we would have found a way to ruin Lawrence anyway. So, okay, a couple other questions. Let's see, Richie. Jalen Stroman potentially getting on the field in 2021.
Fuente said he's the most advanced of the rookie DBs,
and he's a January enrollee, right?
So he never got his senior season.
Yeah, that's
remember, which is pretty incredible when you think about it. And so I'm glad he enrolled early instead of playing that senior season. I think some guys reach a certain point of their development where they have to step up a level of competition before they can continue their development. So apparently he's at that stage. So I don't think sitting around, if he's already the most advanced freshman defensive back at Virginia Tech, then he wouldn't have gotten any better sitting around playing 6 games in a spring season in Virginia that maybe some players care about and some don't. So I'm glad he's here. So yeah, he's physically going to be able to play this year, certainly special teams. So yeah, he'd be one of my picks to play early.
And it's interesting. He's part of a group of 4 defensive backs that enrolled in January: Nike Johnson, Jalen Stroman, Jalen Hoyle, and Deshaun Elder.
And they all got every single one of those other guys got to play this year.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, couple of rapid fire quick ones. Richard Farley, do we plan on being fully staffed this year, or is it more of a long-term goal?
I think it's building up as you go along.
Yeah, some of it's going to depend on like who's available. Like and you're not going to hire a guy just for the sake of hiring somebody. But if you think a position is important and you think this is a guy who fits this need that we have, then yeah, I think they're fully committed to doing that right now as soon as possible.
The other thing that may gum up the works is that the money that's coming in at this point, you have to prioritize it. Do you want to use it to keep the assistant coaches that you're like? What if somebody makes a run at Vance Vice?
Right.
You may wind up spending money to keep Vance Vice as opposed to hiring more recruiting people.
Fuente was asked about this in the Q&A part. He said, I forget who asked, probably David Teal. He would ask a question like this, like, of the 5 points for the football program, like,
what are you going to do first?
Yeah, does one take priority over the others? And Fuente said, no, they're all kind of equal.
Yeah.
So if you bring in $100,000 donation, then you split it up.
Right.
Maybe between all that. So there's not necessarily one of those 5 factors that is more important than the other in their eyes.
Still, events may dictate.
But events may dictate, and who's available. And if somebody makes a run at Vance Vice, that obviously that's pretty important to keep him, I think. So.
All right. Nate asks a loaded question that would be really good that we're going to have to somehow condense very quickly. We got 2 left.
Good luck.
Looks like Florida State has 2 5-star recruits. VT never got recruits like that, even after Fuente's good start in 2016. Both Fu and Norvell came from Memphis. Any thoughts on why Florida State can land those recruits?
Oh, yes, and I can't say I'm on air because I
cha-ching,
get sued
cha-ching,
for libel.
cha-ching.
Yeah. I've heard plenty of stories from about Florida State recruiting, even some from like Tech players who had friends at Florida State and who were recruited by Florida State.
Cha-ching.
So...
Cha-ching.
Look, and that's never going to – it doesn't matter who our head coach is. Virginia Tech
Cha-ching.
is always going to recruit worse on paper than Florida State. So if your expectation is if we woke up tomorrow and Virginia Tech started recruiting as well as Florida State, then I'd know why.
Cha-ching.
Okay. All right. Last one from Kate. When would we see these extra assistants hired? Ideal job for Bud.
Okay, so I actually had a conversation with Bud about this probably a couple of months ago, where I said something. I don't remember what prefaced it, but I basically said, people are asking me all the time if you'd be interested in being a defensive analyst. And I'm like, no, you're enjoying retirement. And Bud looked at me and said, well, they haven't asked me. But he did. Then he went on to say, if he were to come back in some sort of capacity like that, it would be with certain stipulations. No 12-hour days, not working all weekends. It would have to be on Bud's terms. So, and it may be that that everybody involved decides they really don't want Bud circulating over there. It's tricky. It's delicate.
It's tough to coach in the shadow of a legend, especially when that legend is right there next to you all day, right? The shadow looms even larger to a certain extent. So, but he's helping out now. What is he doing now? He's doing something over there.
He's basically doing fundraising type stuff. He's doing. He was on one of the Zoom calls with former players.
Right. So he's an ambassador for Virginia Tech right now.
That's kind of the job title, and that's pretty much what he's doing.
Yeah.
It does have in his as I pull up his Twitter real quick. In his bio, it says special assistant to the athletics director.
Yeah, there you go. And the other part of that question was
when would we see these extra assistants hired?
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime now for support staff, anytime between now and the start of the season, you could see some. Obviously regular assistants, it's too late if you wanted to replace any of those.
And let's be clear with the Virginia Tech fan base. You're not necessarily going to hear a bunch of announcements. This a lot of these staff are hired and they go to work, and you don't hear about it.
You don't hear about it. I do want to make one further comment. Everybody. I'll use Cornelson as an example, not because I want to get the guy fired or anything like that, but it's because he's always the hot topic because he's an offensive coordinator.
Because he's an offensive coordinator.
Right. Everybody wanted, not everybody, but a lot of people wanted Fuente to replace Cornelson this past year. Cornelson makes like $450,000 a year or something like that. There's no way you go on the open market with $450,000 and definitely upgrade. In fact, your chances of finding an offensive coordinator as good as Brad Cornelson for $450,000 on the open market is very low.
Yeah.
So if you play the percentages, if you're Justin Fuente, it doesn't make any sense because for $450,000, you'll probably just end up getting worse. So what this does is if you're a coach that you felt safe before because you knew Virginia Tech, quite frankly, didn't have the monetary resources to find somebody better than you. What that does is, kicks you in the butt to a certain extent. You say, oh, man, my position group's got to have a really good year this year. Otherwise, now Virginia Tech's actually going to have the money to fire me and upgrade, right? So I do think it maybe indirectly fires a shot across the bow for some guys. And I'm not naming any names or anything like that, and I'm not even really talking about Cornelson. I was just using him as an example because offensive coordinator is everybody's favorite topic.
Great questions today. Really appreciate everybody. By the way, especially shout out Kate. She was with us. She welcomed us in like right as we went live and here.
Been there the whole time,
so,
huh?
So nearly a 2-hour podcast, but as Chris kind of said, kind of like a season finale.
Season finale
in some ways.
Yes.
So today on a very special TSL podcast.
Yeah. We'll don't really know what the schedule will be moving forward. I know you've got a big trip coming up, right?
I'm flying to the Caribbean next Tuesday, so this is definitely a season finale for me. So I don't know. Y'all can do whatever. I'm not worried about it. Have a guest.
You'll be watching from wherever you'll be.
No, I probably won't be.
We'll keep everyone posted on what the schedule is looking like moving forward. But in the meantime, you still go to TechSideline.com. Even if he's in the Caribbean, he's still gonna have great content on TSL at some point. So what's coming up at least this week before you leave?
Well,
Chris?
Will's gonna write a Monday Thoughts, or has written
mostly written
the Monday Thoughts. Brandon Patterson sent an article which I can now postpone until tomorrow. I'm going to do some more on my PFF series that got delayed by our coverage of spring practice and everything like that.
Yeah.
Regular Friday Q&A. Bigger question for me is what I'm going to write to leave for him to post next week.
Yeah, he has to write 7 articles before he goes.
Wow.
Just
It
kidding.
won't be that many, but it'll be like 2 or 3.
Yeah.
Awesome. Gentlemen, great show today. Any closing thoughts?
No, that ran quite long. I didn't expect that.
Oh, well, at this point, I expect them
Yeah.
all to run long.
Yeah.
We're getting so many good questions these days.
That's the thing, and I tell you what, the converse. I mean, anyways, who doesn't love a long pod? My favorite is when we say like, "Oh, we're past an hour," and people are like, "No, it's okay. Go long. We enjoy it." So, anyways, Twitterazzi, stay classy out there, and I love that word. I'm serious. You need to.
I actually
trademark
called it.
that
I actually pronounced it Twitterati, but
Twitterati. I'm sorry.
Well, Twitterazzi sounds like paparazzi. So
Well, that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Twitterati. They both go hand.
So now I'm in flux. I'm not sure which one I should use.
Be sure to check out Will's article today. It's going to be a great one. He's on Twitter at Will Stewart, TSL, and Chris is on Twitter at Chris Coleman, TSL. Maybe he'll tweet out pictures of him on the beach somewhere, enjoying the nice weather. So, that'll wrap things up. Thanks so much to everybody for watching and listening. And we're on Twitter at Tech Sideline as well, as stay up to date with everything going on in Virginia Tech athletics. That'll wrap it up for our managing editor, Chris Coleman, our founder and general manager, Will Stewart, the best podcast producer in the land, behind the scenes, Malcolm Stewart. I'm your podcast host, Evan Hughes. Thanks so long, and thanks so much for watching and listening to episode 178 of the Tech Sideline podcast presented by the Southeast Regional Training Center. Have a great week, Hokies. We'll talk to you soon.